Hello, and welcome to Montgomery County, Maryland Office of Consumer Protections program on P2P payment platforms. If you're not familiar with what our office does, we provide consumer specialists, our very own investigators, who can help you with any consumer-related questions you have. On the screen, you will see an email address that you can use to reach us at any time with any questions on your consumer merchant transactions. You can also file a complaint with our office, and we will have an investigator assigned who will then review your facts and the law and try to work through the system and through the process to try and resolve your complaint. If in the course of the investigation, the issues become a matter of a violation of the law, our investigators do have the ability to file for citations or even criminal charges if the underlying law would permit. The office also provides additional outreach and education opportunities, which you can see on our YouTube page, or you can invite a speaker to come to a presentation either through Zoom or if conditions permit, in person. Additionally, our office is part of the licensing and regulation of certain industries in Montgomery County. We license new home builders. We also provide registration for auto repair shops. So if you are getting your car repaired, they should hopefully have our certificate visible. We also register anyone that would come into your home to fix your consumer electronics or your appliances like your refrigerator or your dishwasher. We also license secondhand personal property dealers. So if you're working with high-end consignment shops, for example, or with pawn shops, they should have our license. Additionally, we also license or register tow companies and commercial parking lots. So if you have any questions about what the Office of Consumer Protection can do for you, please feel free to reach out to us. So payment systems have obviously needed to change during the pandemic. And so this program will focus on a little bit about how this payment-to-payment, peer-to-peer payment systems has escalated during the pandemic. As you can imagine, contactless payments have become a turbocharged need during the pandemic, and retailers are reporting that contactless payments have increased 69% since January 2020. In April of 2020, PayPal reports that their accounts increased 7.4 million, or by 7.4 million, which is 135% growth. The forecasters believe that it may have something to do with the fact that EIP disbursements could come faster if you had a PayPal account, and that might have driven up the registration rate. Venmo reports $37 billion was transferred in just the second quarter of 2020 through its system, which is a 52% increase from the year before. The number of active Venmo users also topped $60 million by July 2020. What's interesting to note, it's not just from the consumer side, the consumer merchant transactions, where P2P payments have increased. If you have seen some of our other webinars, you know that we talked about the wage advance apps like EarnIn or Branch. If not, you should definitely check out our other webinars that talks about those programs a bit more. But Domino's has partnered with Branch to provide same-day wages to their drivers. So P2P platforms are being used in novel ways by employers as well. So in any given day, you have four basic payment options in addition to cash. Credit cards are ones that I think everybody is familiar with. They're not linked to your bank account, the one that has all of your paychecks going in, or your savings account. It helps build credit, and all of your legal protections are under maybe the Truth in Lending Act, as well as the Fair Credit Billing Act. You will see the chip cards, you may see tap to pay cards, and then there's the ones that you still have to swipe. Chip is still the safest from skimming devices, but you should know that the tap and pay doesn't transmit your name, your card number, or your 3-digit security. It is just a little bit less safe than the chip cards. Swipe is the least safe, and that is because the whole reason the chip was created was to protect skimming from the swipe cards, getting all the information off the magnetic strip. So if you go into a store and the chip reader isn't working and you have to skim or swipe it, know that if a skimmer happens to be nearby, that could be a risk. However, also know that the law that put the chip cards into play also provides some really stiff penalties to a merchant who has a data breach and used swipe instead of chip. Of course, by that point, that's a little comfort to you if you've been a victim of a data breach, but it's still important to know. Debit cards used to be the old ATM cards. So you go to the ATM machine, withdraw your money, pay in cash. Sometimes you can use it at pharmacies or at grocery stores. And then a bit ago, the Visa MasterCard logo was added. And so they were called check cards to try to replace convenience checks. And so they're out there and you can use these hybrid cards pretty much anywhere. However, these are linked to your bank account, whereas credit cards are not. And you have no protections under the Fair Credit Billing Act just because there's a Visa or MasterCard logo. So if you're used to having a $50 limit on your liability, know that that's available to credit cards, and debit cards follow a completely different set of rules. So you will instead have some protections under the Electronic Funds Transfer Act, which is also what applies to wire transfers. So money transfer services like Western Union or MoneyGram. So debit cards are a hybrid card in the sense that they are like many things, but not exactly one thing. So that's also important to know. So mobile pay, these P2P platforms like PayPal is the granddaddy of them all, Venmo, Zelle, Apple Pay, Cash App, etc. There's so many. These are either linked to a bank account or your card or a credit card, and the credit card it could be a true credit card, so it's not linked to a bank account, or in theory, it could also be linked to your debit card. The transactions are treated like cash, and that's important to know because like a wire transfer, like cash, it's virtually untraceable if there's a scam down the road. There are no current statutory protections for P2P payments. And again, they're very much treated like cash. You might be able to get into and argue that it's protected by the Electronic Fund Transfer Act, which may very well apply, but know that they are not providing you as a consumer the amount of protections that you're used to if you're doing a credit card transaction. So what are some risks with P2P? Obviously, it's possible to have a malware or a virus on your phone or on your computer that could then infiltrate the application. And there's some privacy or security concerns, which we will discuss a little bit later on. So digital payments, they are not all bad because obviously it allows you to have access to goods and services while in quarantine or social distancing. And if there is a widespread, consistent internet access and trustworthy ways of getting money in digital formats, they could really be important for future economic expansion and for smaller businesses as well. So how do you sign up and set up your P2P system? If you're dealing with a non-bank platform, so Zelle is currently the main main bank platform. So if you're dealing with the non-bank platform, you would have to download the app, create an account, digitally link it to a bank account or a credit card or a debit card, or even one of those prepaid cards you could pick up at the grocery store if you wanted to use those. With a bank, you would have to go through your bank's online setup to download all the programs that it would needed and to connect it as they require. So how does these platforms work? The sender can send you an invoice or a money request, or you can just outright just send the money from email to email or from phone number to phone number, depending on which app you're using. The recipient gets a notification that someone sent your money and with instructions on how to retrieve it. Usually the recipient doesn't pay for the transfer. Now, if it's set up as a business account, and PayPal has two different kinds of accounts. So sometimes if you are used to using PayPal, you might get a request to make sure you send it as friends and family so that they don't end up with a charge on the other end. There could be some fees that vary up to 3% sometimes for some apps if you're paying using a credit card or some debit cards and it's not coming directly out of your bank account. And I think that's usually set up for any risk of chargeback or disputes that folks may have. And so how quickly the person on the other end gets the money is really dependent on the app itself, but it's pretty quick. And it's absent some server issues or user errors. These kinds of transactions are almost instantaneous as far as going through. So we talked about what kinds of consumer protections are in place. And so this chart really describes the difference between the Electronic Funds Transfer Act and the Fair Credit Billing Act. And so with credit cards, we're used to being able to dispute charges, and the maximum liability is $50. And you can see that here it's a little different if you're using a debit card or a P2P system. Any kind of payment that comes under the EFTA comes through this kind of series of questions on timing. And as you can see, if you wait anywhere between 2 business days and 60 calendar days to report a fraud or a loss, you could be on the hook for $500. And over 60 days, you may be out that money entirely. And so we always advocate that if you're going to do any digital transaction, whether you're buying things online outright, or if you're going to try and use your P2P platform, try and link it to a credit card, not a debit card, or even into your bank account. And we'll talk about the bootstrapping in a bit, but you may be able to bootstrap in the Fair Credit Billing Act protections if you have these, if you use credit cards for these kinds of mobile transactions. So what are some quick facts about P2P apps? One, they are designed to be quick and easy ways to give money to someone you know. And so this is, if you see the commercials, there's people sitting at restaurants and they're fighting over the bill and someone zips the money to their friend. Or it's just for transactions, if you are refunding money or if you borrowed money and you want to give it back. It's meant to be for people you know. So it's not meant to be used for shopping. Although Etsy, if folks are on Etsy a lot, you will see that a lot of the merchants there will accept Apple Pay, for example. It's not recommended for online shopping, and you really shouldn't use it for people that you don't know or trust. And that is because, as we will talk about, it's really, really hard to undo transactions. These are also, for the most part, except for Zelle, they're managed by third-party companies. So they're not your bank, and you are essentially handing over information to a third party. And every time you give your information and your data to a third party, you are relying on them and their record keepers to keep it safe and secure. So keep that in mind as well if you decide to branch out into a P2P platform. And as we've talked about before, they just don't offer the same protections as credit cards. How do you secure your platform? Say you've decided you want to go with this anyway, how do you do it? One, you always want to opt into the strongest security that the system allows. So if there's multi-factor authentication, take it. If you have a PayPal account, I think they still give out those little number generator fobs if you don't want to use an authenticator app, or if you want to use something completely off your phone as a third layer of security, you may try to get some kind of a PIN generator from the company. Again, only send money to folks you know. That's obviously the securest way of doing it. And you always want to make sure that you have the correct spelling of an email address, if that's the method that needs to be typed in, or the phone number, because misdirected money is very difficult to claw back, and we'll talk about why. You don't want to use these services for business purposes. And again, I said there's a lot of folks online who are using it and successfully using it. But we'll talk about some of the problems out there with some of these mobile apps if you are a business that's looking to expand and accept P2P platforms. And you always want to make sure your app is up to date. They are constantly updating these apps to plug security holes or vulnerabilities that they find. So you're probably asking yourself, well, what's the best? What's the safest? And we really can't answer that. I do note that Consumer Reports did a review of the payment apps, and for some reason they did not review PayPal. I'm not sure why. And they gave Apple Pay the highest score and Zelle the lowest score. However, that score was based entirely on the amount of information these apps have to lose if there's a data breach. Apple Pay doesn't even need to be connected to a bank account or a credit card. If someone happens to transfer money into your Apple Pay account, you've now set up an account, and that money can stay there, and you can use it to buy things or to receive money. You technically don't have to set it up and connect it if you're not going to be an advanced user of the platform. And so for that reason, because doesn't have to be connected to absolutely anything, it has the least to lose in a data breach. Zelle, because it is connected to your bank, obviously has access to your social security number, all of the data the bank could possibly have, including your bank account information. So it isn't really saying that Zelle is bad. It's perfectly fine as far as an app goes, but Consumer Reports was really looking from a data security basis and said, Apple has the least to lose, therefore it's the safest. The one tip we have is you want to make sure there's no hidden fees to you or to your recipient. And you also want to do your research and see if there's any bad reviews on an app before you download it. And you always want to make sure that you're downloading the real app. Apple is pretty good about policing their marketplace. Android has a lot of bogus counterfeit versions of apps out there. So you want to make sure you're downloading the correct app and that you're not connecting your bank account or credit card to a scam company in the first place. So I think I've mentioned a little bit about what the main concerns are, but I'd like to go in a little bit deeper. So what happens if there is an error or a fraud? So dispute resolution is a major main concern. A misdirected payments, you can't reverse it yourself. And a provider, the app provider, won't help you if the recipient refuses to return the misdirected funds. So there's, the app can ask the recipient to send it back, but they can't force them to. In the case of outright fraud, if you are tricked into sending money to a scammer, the law doesn't require these P2P apps to help you recover those funds. In fact, Venmo recently threatened collections for scam victims with negative balances because they say, look, It's not, either you pay it or we have to pay it, and we weren't part of this transaction. We had nothing to do with the decision that you made to send money to the scammers, so it's not going to be us. So you need to be aware of how careful you have to be if you're going to use P2P apps with people that you don't know and have never met. Payment security is also an issue. We talked about it briefly a few slides ago. Apps do not default to the highest security level. So you have to review the settings and make sure you have toggled on every security measure that the app has available. Most don't require passwords or PINs or fingerprint with their default settings, so you want to make sure you set that up. So in addition to multi-factor, make sure if your phone has a thumbprint setting, make sure you connect that to the app so that your thumbprint is required to even access it before you get into an MFA generated PIN or access number. And also Venmo has this interesting feature where its default is that it posts to social media every transaction that you make on it. So you have to go in and affirmatively turn that off, or the entire world will know that you've been on Venmo and you're paying, $25 for whatever it is. Apple and Venmo have a secondary, so when you say I want to pay $20 to my buddy, for the groceries he bought, for example, and you put it in, you hit pay, and then you have to hit pay again. So some apps have this confirmation of payment built in, which is good to have. And some of the other apps may have it. I'm only familiar with Apple and Venmo myself as a user, as with PayPal. So that's kind of some of the issues. And we talked about Venmo and the social media. Also, be aware that some of the apps are reserving their right to use your data for all unrelated purposes or to sell your information. So if there's a way of you opting out, you want to make sure you opt out. That way your phone number isn't being sold. And that could, down the line, as your phone number is sold and resold, you get a lot of junk text, you get a lot of scam texts and phone calls. Things from the white market end up in the gray market and then in the black market to scammers. So the less your information is shared, the better it is. So I wanted to provide some examples of actual cases we have had and some frauds that we have read about and discussed on social media. So Parking Lot Pirate is a real case. There are these mobile repair folks that will stop you in parking lots and say, hey, I do auto body work. I see you're coming out of AutoZone. I see you're coming out of Target, but there's a ding in your car. I'm happy to work on it right here. I happen to have stuff in the trunk of my car. And they will then ask for payment through an app. And in this particular case, it was through Venmo. Turns out the repair was bad. One rain and everything washed clean, and it was just basically a bad patch. And when we investigated, we realized that the email address used to set up the Venmo account was an email address of a child. And the merchant had given his name and even had shown a driver's license. Well, when we actually investigated that person, it turned out it belonged to someone who lived in Florida. So you had an email address that belonged to a child and a driver's license that belonged to a Florida resident. This parking lot pirate was a ghost. We were unable to find him. And so the money was gone and the bad auto repair had to get undone. In another example, what we call romance gone wrong, this was a typical romance scam, and a lot of romance scams are just for outright money, but sometimes romance scammers are looking to turn you into an unwitting money mule in a money laundering scheme, which is what happened here. This gentleman was given checks to deposit in a bank account of his own, and then to PayPal the money to his girlfriend, but as it turned out, he was a money mule. He was an unwitting victim and a participant in wire fraud, and it's a federal offense. So that was also someone that we were not able to track down, and we had to turn him over to the FBI so they could continue to investigate this issue. Identity thieves. We had a case where an identity theft had opened a PayPal account, and in the consumer's name, using his account information. However, for consumer to contest it, he had to use the email address to communicate. But of course, he did not know the email address that the identity thief has used to create this account. And so he was stymied in his ability to address this issue. In that case, we were able to go around that block and communicate directly with PayPal. But that shows you that sometimes there are these systemic blocks in a consumer's ability to directly address and deal with problems on their own, which is what we're here for. So you can definitely come to us. Of 3 scams that I want to talk about, which we have not received any complaints about, but we have heard about, is one is the digital wallet scam. There, the person will get a message in the app that says, oops, I sent something to you by mistake. It was an error. Remember, we talked about misdirected payments can only be turned back if the receiver says, fine, I will do it. So in this scam, the message comes to you that says, oops, I sent you money by mistake. And they want you to send the money back. Now, know with an app, you can cancel the transaction, and canceling a transaction is different than sending the money back. So the way this scam works is the bad guys take a stolen credit card and connect it to, we'll say Cash App this time. They'll connect it to the app and send you $40. And then they'll e-message you and say, oops, I sent it to you by mistake. Could you send me $40 back? In the meantime, they've switched their account from the stolen card to one of their own cards. So when you send the money back, it goes to a second credit card. Meanwhile, the person who had their credit card number stolen disputes the charge. And so now you are out $40. The consumer who had their credit card stolen has been made whole, although the bank is now out $40, and the bad guys have your money. So if you ask them to cancel the transaction, and if they don't or come up with an excuse as to why they can't, it's likely a scam. So you definitely want to reach out to the app provider and ask that they review the issue with you. Job scams, they are also being used as part of a money mule, or even as part of a check scam, check fraud scams like you would normally see on Craigslist. So you find a job online, you do the interview online, you've not really met anybody, and be very wary about Google Hangout interviews with people that you don't see, or things seem a little too easy and quick to get a job. So part of the orientation process will require them to send you a check that you deposit, and then you have to buy equipment. And usually you have to buy equipment with your own account or via an app. And of course, they have their preferred supplier, and their preferred supplier is themselves, obviously. There's no equipment, then they'll never see, or you'll never see or hear from them again, because the check that you deposited doesn't really clear. It may be available to you within a couple of days by your bank, but for it to get presented bank to bank at the Federal Reserve, it could take up to 2 weeks. So it can take 2 weeks for your check to really clear, even though the bank is floating you that money as if it did clear within a couple of days. So job scams definitely use apps as well. This one gets its own slide because it is so pervasive. This is, they call it the eBay Motors scam, but frankly, it applies to Craigslist, Facebook, Auto Trader, Cycle Trader, Penny Saver, anywhere that they sell any kind of motor vehicle, boat, farm equipment, ATVs, RVs, jet skis, trailers. Like if it moves, you're looking to buy it, be aware of this. So during the pandemic, they're saying, well, I can't really get you to test drive it if it happens to be nearby because I'm worried about COVID. Most often, historically, this scam has been for items that are not local to you. The price is usually way below market. So you think, wow, this is a great deal. They'll say, hey, I'm deploying and I got to get rid of this. I'm going through a divorce and I need the money. This was my husband and it's just, I can't see it anymore. It's just too emotional for me now that he's died to have this truck in front. The pictures will be great. They're stock photos. They're photos from cars that other people have actually sold. Who knows where the pictures come from? Know this, the vehicle, whatever it is, doesn't exist. It's just a photo. And they'll tell you that there's some escrow account or some insurance by the shipping company that's going to send it to you if it's not nearby, or that somehow eBay is escrowing the money. If you're not buying it through the eBay platform and checking out through eBay, nothing is protected by eBay. This scam is primarily coming out of Romania, some out of Cameroon. So you're not even dealing with a local scam artist by and large. The FBI reported from 2014 to 2017, the $57 million was reported. Know that this scam doesn't only use P2P apps, it can also use wire transfer and gift cards. Gift cards are for gifts. They are not to be used to pay bills. So just keep that in mind. If anyone asks for you to pay using a gift card, ask yourself, is this really a gift? And if not, why am I using iTunes or Amazon or eBay money to buy something off of Penny Saver? A quick word to our business viewers about the perils of using payment apps. In this one case that we're going to discuss, it may give you some pause as you think about it. Obviously, smaller e-businesses are thriving using these apps during the pandemic. But in this one case, this particular business showed a mysterious drop-off in his bank account out of his account. Like all of a sudden, money was missing. And he used Cash App, which is Square's product. Cash App has no phone number for you to call. Bad guys know this, so they have set up fake websites that claim to be customer service. So you then call this company, believing you're contacting Cash App, and to dispute this charge. And they said, okay, well, I need to validate your account. Could you provide me some information to validate? So of course, now you're handing over your Cash App account information, maybe your login credentials, whatever it is they're asking for. And in the guise of addressing the dispute, now the bad guys have direct access to your app and your bank account, and now they're just wiring and transferring money out. And in the meantime, the dispute doesn't even exist because Cash App has never been contacted. So they have no idea any of this is going on. So if you are going to take a step into using Cash Apps, you definitely want to make sure that you have a direct way to contact somebody and speak with them by phone. Email is great and convenient if it's 11 o'clock at night and you're not going to reach anyone, you just want to put a question in that can wait. But if it's emergency and you need to speak to someone, you want to make sure you have a phone number. We originally did this program with NCPL, and so I always like to include a little bit of reading material for folks so that they can read up on this topic. And on this page, it's got some books that the library has either in hard copy for holds or through digital downloads. The one item on here, which is Scam Me If You Can, Simple Strategies to Outsmart Today's Ripoff Artist by Frank Abagnale. He also has a podcast with a similar name, Scam Me If You Can. And this probably has a good food for thought to avoid scams of all kinds. But if you're interested in reading about cryptocurrencies and how digital payments may become the industry of the future, or if you're a business and you're thinking, okay, I want to maybe start accepting payments on the web, here's a book that you might be able to take. And if you want to learn about the differences between credit cards and other payment methods, the final checklist would be good. And obviously, the Consumer Handbook to Credit Protection Laws is always dense reading, but still a good resource if you have the time. So having reviewed these slides, if you have any questions about what you've seen, you can either post them in the comment section of the video or feel free to email us. If you come to our website, we have a lot of information in our A to Z library. And right on the front page, we have links to our social media pages. You don't have to have an account with them in order to be able to view them. They're public, but if you do have Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or YouTube, feel free to subscribe or follow us. And that way you get our regular alerts about recent or new scams or things that we're seeing out there. But we look forward to hearing from you, and thank you for being here at our program.